America's favorite quarantine binge, Tiger King, takes us into the world of big cat owners, dealers, and collectors, where apparently owning more than 100 tigers and lions isn't enough drama for the central characters Joe Exotic and Carole Baskin, who carry on a decades-long feud that includes lawsuits, blood-soaked bunny costumes, and eventually a full-blown murder plot.
You paid somebody to kill Carole Baskin.
The central point of the beef is Joe Exotic's belief that Carole killed her husband Don Lewis, fed him to tigers, and stole his fortune. Which begs the question, from a lawyer's point of view, is there a case against Carole Baskin? Hey all you cool cats and kittens, welcome back to Legal Lunch Break. As soon as Tiger King hit Netflix, the internet was only too ready to condemn Carole Baskin, with body language experts, conspiracy theorists, and even the champion of justice himself, O.J. Simpson, chiming in with his verdict.
There's not a shred of doubt in my mind that that lady's husband is tiger sashimi right now. I'm just saying.
Did Carole Baskin kill Don Lewis and feed him to tigers? Everyone has their own opinion on this, but in this video, we're limiting ourselves to the evidence in the documentary, and we're gonna ask ourselves, does that evidence stand up to legal scrutiny? Exhibit A, the sardine oil.
If I were gonna, if somebody wanted to kill you, then they would put like sardine oil all over you, something that the cat wants to eat, not something the cat wants to drool.
So that's a little bit creepy. Carole Baskin talking about if you wanted to get a tiger to eat somebody, well, you just dunk them in some sardine oil. If Carole Baskin was on trial for the murder of Don Lewis, would you be able to get that statement into evidence? In our courtrooms, there are rules, and the judge serves as the gatekeeper of those rules. The judge gets to decide what evidence is admissible and what evidence is inadmissible. And that decision will determine what the jury actually get to consider when coming to their verdict. The cardinal rule of evidence is relevance. And whether a piece of evidence is relevant is really a question of whether or not it moves the needle. Does it make your theory of the case more likely? And in this case, when we're talking about sardine oil for the killing of Don Lewis, the one missing link is we don't know how Don Lewis died. Hell, we don't even know if Don Lewis died. And if we can't prove that Don Lewis died by being eaten by tigers, then it's not relevant whether or not Carole knew that sardine oil made tigers more likely to eat a human being. It's a bit of a stretch, and in this case, I would expect the judge to rule that this evidence was inadmissible. Exhibit B, Don's plan to divorce.
And that everything he earned by himself and brought into this marriage by himself, I wish there was some way out for me. I'd say she found a way out. Wouldn't you?
You know what, Joe? You say a lot of shit. Okay, Joe? You say a lot of shit. So maybe she did find her way out. But I will say that Carole Baskin, saying in her diary that she was aware of Don's plan to divorce her and aware that she would probably get nothing in a divorce would fall in the admissible bucket. Because in that case, it moves the needle to say that it's more likely that she had the motive to actually commit this murder. So when we're talking about Exhibit B, I would say admissible. Exhibit C, the will and power of attorney.
I was the power of attorney for both of them.
Who was the power of attorney on the new documents Carole produced?
Not me. That new power of attorney gave her control over the estate.
Carole supposedly breaks into the office, steals the will, steals the power of attorney, destroys it, and then changes it so that she is now the executor and the administrator of the power of attorney and the will. If it was destroyed, the judge should allow Don's old secretary to testify about the contents, what actually was in the first will, so that the jury could understand how that was different from the second will that Carole prepared. Exhibit C, I would say admissible. Exhibit D, the restraining order affidavit.
It was in an envelope, and he said, here, you need to take this home, you need to keep it. If anything happens to me, give it to the police.
So here we have 2 threats that Carole has made to kill Don. You gotta understand that documents by their nature are hearsay. And we've heard that term probably a lot in pop culture. But what hearsay is any out-of-court statement being offered as evidence in a case. The actual statement being considered, or that would be considered, is Don saying that Carole threatened him. It's not the actual threats, it's Don's statement that Carole threatened him. For that to come into evidence, it would have to fall under an exception to the hearsay rule. There are many exceptions to the hearsay rule, but I'm gonna cut to the chase and tell you that I don't think this one is any one of those, and it's inadmissible, okay? Next statement.
Carole and I got into a big fuss and she ordered me out of the house or she would kill me.
This is the same issue. Don talking about a statement that Carole made back to Don at another point in time. Oftentimes what lawyers will try to do is say that this falls under an exception called an excited utterance or a present sense impression, saying that the person was observing these things and spontaneously made this statement and therefore it's reliable. Because Don is writing this affidavit at a later point in time, it wouldn't fall under those exceptions. And again, I would say this is inadmissible.
She has a .45 revolver and she took my .357 and hid it.
That happened in June and he disappeared in August.
Remember, the theory of the case is that Don got eaten by tigers. And so for guns to be even relevant, we'd have to change the theory of the case and say that before Don was eaten by tigers, that Carole shot him with one of these 2 guns. And we're really getting into the weeds here, okay? Exhibit D, inadmissible. Exhibit E, the body.
There'd be skeletons, there'd be bones, there'd be something.
His own kids demanded that they DNA test the meat grinder.
So theory number 1 for the body, the meat grinder. Did Carole put Don's entire body through a meat grinder?
We had a meat grinder. If you've ever seen a Butcher Boy meat grinder, it's about that big around. That became like this wholly exciting thing that I ran him through that grinder, and it's like, I couldn't have run his hands through the grinder, much less a...
Clearly she thought about it though. I mean, she's now talking about whether or not she could have fed at least one part of his body through the grinder.
If we could ever get the law to go in there and dig up that septic tank, I promise you he's underneath that damn thing.
So now we have a second theory for the body, the septic tank. And some people may say, you know, the more theories, the better. It makes it more likely that it happened. Let's use the spaghetti on the wall approach. Let's see what sticks. However, at trial, it's often unhelpful to offer alternative theories. It tends to show that you're not sure about your portion of the case. And that is even worse in cases like this, where we don't even have a body to begin with.
These tigers have such an acidic stomach that when you feed them a whole turkey, there's no bones that come out. Okay, it's gone.
So here is our bread and butter theory. The theory that Carole fed Don to the tigers. And for this theory to be true, we've got to be able to prove that this tiger had such an acidic stomach that the body just disappeared. You'd have to probably hire an expert to tell you that the pH levels in a tiger's stomach are so high, or I don't even know the chemistry involved, that they would dissolve the bones. And who better to hire than Joe Exotic himself? Exhibit E, the body, it doesn't exist, absolutely inadmissible. Exhibit F, Carole's creepiness. Carole Baskin doesn't know the names of her volunteers. She wears leopard print to Congress. She takes photo ops with her husband on a leash, and she holds herself out to be the saint for big cats. But in reality, she's profiting from the same exact thing as Joe Exotic. But just because Carole Baskin is basically unlikable doesn't make it more likely that she killed her husband, Don Lewis. And that is the reason we have the character evidence rule. so that people aren't convicted for their likability, but instead convicted because there's evidence that proves they committed the crime. If Joe Exotic or anybody else walked through my door and asked me to pursue a case against Carole Baskin, unless they had other compelling evidence that wasn't included in the documentary, I'd tell them no. I'm sorry to disappoint, but there's not a case against Carole Baskin. If you disagree, leave your conspiracy theories below and I'd be happy to comment back. Thanks for joining us. I look forward to seeing you next time.